Good evening, everyone. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Great Tribulation. What is the Great Tribulation? What does the Bible say about it? And especially when will it take place? There's a few mentions of the Great Tribulation in the Bible. We see here in Revelation 7:14, it says, Then he said to me, These are the ones coming out of the Great Tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. There's also, of course, Yeshua's reference to the Great Tribulation. We find it. What's happening to my power? All right. In Matthew 24, verse 20 to 22, where Yeshua said, Moreover, pray that when you flee, it will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. And if those days had not been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Now, the Bible dictionary speaks about the Great Tribulation and defines it as a relatively short period of time where everyone will experience worldwide hardships, persecution, disasters, famine, war, pain, and suffering, which will affect all of creation. Now, here is the big question. When will it take place? Well, that is the question that nobody can agree on. There are multiple theories or views on when this will happen. And these are the ones we're going to look at tonight. There's a preterist view, a historicist view, a futurist view that is divided into three different separate views. So some believe that the Great Tribulation has already taken place. Some believe that we are currently in the Great Tribulation, and we have been for many years. And yet many also believe that it's a future event, one that has not yet happened. So let's explore each of these, and I'll show you why they believe what they believe. And we can discuss, of course, these different views after. But the preterist view, they believe that it occurred entirely in the past, around 70 AD, when the armed forces of the Roman Empire destroyed Jerusalem and its temple. Christian preterists believe that the tribulation was a divine judgment upon the Jews for their sins, including their rejection of Yeshua as the Messiah. And it only affected the Jewish people rather than all of mankind. And they use verses such as Yeshua's passage in Matthew 24, where he was talking about the Great Tribulation, where he said, Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Also, Yeshua had previously said to the Pharisees and the scribes, he had said, Truly, I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. So a generation typically is 40 years. And so these people are using these passages of scripture to say, and that's why it happened in around 70 AD. Okay. And they say that the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and the one that Yeshua referred to in Matthew 24, it actually began when Yeshua visited Jerusalem and he pronounced that there shall not be left here one stone upon another, when he was talking about the temple. And so you see the preterists, they see nothing in scripture to indicate there will be a third temple. They believe that the prophecies were all fulfilled within that first generation. So this is one view, the preterist view. And then there's a historist view, okay? And these people believe that the tribulation is not a future event, but one that began in 70 AD and has continued, not just for one generation, but it has continued for centuries, during which Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles. And they're using scripture like this one to support their thinking. In Luke 21, and they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So for them, this doesn't just include the 1 million Jews that died at the hand of the Romans in 70 AD when they burnt Jerusalem, but it also includes the death of the 6 million Jews in the Holocaust and continues to this day. They believe that the Great Tribulation is not a future event, but that tribulation will intensify towards the end to become a time such as never before, as per Matthew's reference to the Great Tribulation. And historicists believe that prophecy was fulfilled down through the centuries. And rather than a single antichrist to rule the earth during a future tribulation period, they believe that there has been several antichrists throughout the ages, including Hitler. And all of these were to carry out persecution of the Jews during this time of the Gentiles. So this is two different views. And so you can see that some believe that the Great Tribulation has already happened. And some believe that we are still in a tribulation period. But then again, many believe in the futurist view, meaning that this tribulation is in the future, an event to come, okay? But even here in the futurist view, there's three different theories or views on this, okay? So we're going to look at that. First of all, there's one called the pre-tribulation, okay? And all of these three are related to the second coming of Yeshua, okay? So some people believe that Christians will be taken up before the tribulations begin, while some believe that Christians will go through part of the tribulations and that Christians will be taken up halfway through the tribulations, but before the worst part of it occurs. And finally, there's a post-tribulation, okay, view where some Christians believe that we will all go through the period of tribulations, all of it. And we're going to examine each of these views. But first, let's look at what these three futurist views have in common, okay? They all agree that tribulations will last 7 prophetic Hebrew years. So that's not 365 days, but it's 360 days. And that this 7-year period, they got this from the passage in Daniel 9, where it says, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. Okay? And it continues to say, in the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. This him that they're talking about is the Antichrist during this period of tribulation. Okay. Now note that it says that in the middle of the seven, the Antichrist will set up an abomination that causes desolation. What is the middle of a 7-year period? Well, it's 3.5 years, or 42 months, or 1,260 days. So the abomination that causes desolation will happen halfway through tribulation. Another thing they agree upon is that the Great Tribulation is the second half of the tribulation period, and it begins after the abomination of desolation, which marks the midway point that we talked about. Look here, we have another passage back to Matthew 24 with Yeshua talking about this time. He says, so when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, that passage we just read about, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetops go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. The Great Tribulation is the second half of the tribulation period. And also, the 7-year tribulation, as I mentioned, is divided into the two halves. They call the first half the beginning of sorrows, and the second half the Great Tribulation. All together, they form this 7 years of tribulation. And now, regarding these 7 years of tribulation, it is considered to be the final week of Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks found in Daniel 9. Okay, so in Daniel 9, verse 24, it says, 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. According to some scholars, each week represents 7 years, with the timetable beginning from the Persian king Artaxerxes, when he ordered the rebuild of the second temple in Jerusalem. So starting then and counting the 77s, which it means 70 times 7 years, okay? And note in Daniel 9:26, Daniel tells us that after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. It says, then after 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. Okay, so this corresponds, this 62 weeks, it corresponds to the death of Yeshua on the cross. 62 times 7, or 454 years after the Persian king ordered the second temple to be rebuilt. Okay, and this is seen as creating a 1-year break of indeterminate length, okay, in time, with 1 week of or 7 years of tribulation remaining to be fulfilled. So ever since that event happened, at 62 weeks, and Yeshua died, we've been in this period where we're waiting for the last 7 to happen. Now, talking about the three different views. Many Christians, wishing to avoid any suffering, believe that they will be taken up just before the tribulations begin. And this is known as the pre-tribulation view. In the pre-tribulation view, the rapture and the second coming of Yeshua are separate events. They believe that they will be taken and that Yeshua will come back after the tribulation to rule the world. Okay? And they use verses such as this one in Revelations 3:10 to support their theory. It is the verse that many claim to as pre-tribulation rapture, where it says, "Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world to test those who live on earth." And here we see the promise that everyone wants to claim for themselves. And quite honestly, you can claim it all you want, but it's only going to those Yeshua says are in the church of Philadelphia. And we did a teaching on this, I guess, a couple months ago, the 7 churches, and we looked at that. So I encourage you, I think it's, I don't know if we recorded that one, perhaps, but let it be known that I do not hold to the belief that is called pre-tribulation rapture. Okay, it would seem that this verse could be referring to those who will be protected in the wilderness from the time of the Antichrist, as given in Revelations 12. And I won't go much more into that, other than to say that when we talk here about an hour, okay, through hour, this reference is not about an hour in a day, but it's a general reference to a time period. And likewise, the hour Yeshua mentions that the church of Philadelphia will be delivered from will be the same, a time of trial for the whole world to be tested, the tribulation. Okay? Now let's look at a very popular view, which is the mid-tribulation view. And then this theory or view is that the rapture will occur halfway through the tribulations, but before the worst part of it occurs. The 7-year period is divided into halves, as I mentioned before. The first half being called the beginning of sorrows, and the second half, the Great Tribulation. Now, interestingly, in the pre-tribulation and in the mid-tribulation views, the rapture and the second coming of Christ are separate events, while the post-tribulation view the two events as being identical and simultaneous. Now, speaking about the 3.5 years, the time period for these beliefs is also based in other passages, like in the book of Daniel, where he says in Daniel 12:1, at that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. And then he continues in verse 7, says, and I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the stream as he raised his right hand and his left towards heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. And as soon as they finish smashing the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. So scholars believe that a time is 1 year, times means 2 years, and half a time means half a year. So if you add it up, that's your 3.5 year period. Okay. And let me see here. So, yes, let's look at this passage. There's more supporting for the 3.5 years. In the book of Revelation, it talks about 1,203 days and 40 and 2 months. And we can see here in Daniel 12:11, it talks about this 3.5 year period in days. It says, and from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, you remember when that happens? At the midway point, there will be 1,290 days. And in Revelations 11:2 and 3, it says, leave out the courtyard, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, because it has been given to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now, why 260 and why 290? Well, I looked into that, and there's all kinds of different theories. Some believe that they're talking about the same 3.5 years, but some people count leap months, and they made adjustments. And sorry about that. And some count it a slightly different way, but all seem to agree that whether you say 1290 or 1260, it adds up to the 3.5 years. And they're talking about that one and same period. Great Tribulation. Let's look at the one and last view, which is the post-tribulation view, where people that are there or believe in this theory believe that Christians will not be taken up until the end of the tribulations, the end of the 7 years, and that all Christians will go through this. And they use scripture such as this one that says in Revelations 2:10, do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. Now, this is the only church, the church of Smyrna, that is informed that they are about to suffer, even though they received no reprimands from Yeshua. Again, we talked about this when we did the study on the 7 churches of Revelations, and there is no explanation given as to why this is the case. Even though there is no reprimand given at all, they are still informed that they will go through hard times of persecution. Could these be those that are going to give testimony in the end times, like Yeshua mentioned in Luke 21? But before all this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. They will deliver you to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. Is it possible that the church of Smyrna will be those in the end times, standing and giving testimony for Yeshua? I don't know, but it does seem possible. Who else should be put in front of those in authority, but those who have a pure heart and will answer according to the Spirit? So I'm going to conclude here, and then we're going to talk about all this. But in conclusion, when it comes to the tribulations, there are many different views or theories about it. We just saw these this evening. There are tribulations. The tribulations are a period of hardship and suffering. And then there is the Great Tribulation, a time of suffering that does not compare with the suffering at any other time in the history of the world. But what people really want to know about this topic is not what it is. What is the tribulation, or what's the Great Tribulation? But people that are interested in this, they want to know, well, when will this happen? And especially, will I have to go through it? Obviously, it depends what view you subscribe to. And this is a very divisive issue. As you can see, many people have different opinions about this. But what matters most is that we be prepared and that we trust God no matter what. I would rather tell people to prepare to go through tribulation rather than tell them, oh, don't worry, you're going to be taken before any tribulation, because they will not be prepared. And the troubles will come and they will not stand. So my recommendation is prepare to go through at least part of the tribulation. And what we know for sure about Yeshua's return is that he's coming back on the Feast of Trumpets. And when he returns, he's going to take us with him to reign for 1,000 years in Jerusalem. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the part I like to focus on and I'm sure of, and I can stand on. These other things are dicey and it can lead to a lot of discussion and division even in churches. But it's important to understand the different views on it, and that's why we've covered it this evening. So let me